Hello there. So instead of crumbling before the mighty European Union, Italy has decided to play its own games. Firstly, as ever, please give this video a like to give my channel a boost, and I'm always uploading new videos, so please do check back daily. And a happy St. George's Day to everyone. So the huge €500 billion crisis package is about to be signed off, and that will give crisis-hit countries such as Italy a line of credit from the European Stability Mechanism to keep their medical efforts going while they deal with this ongoing invisible enemy. But the cost of that credit will be borne solely by the countries, like Italy, that are expected to tap into it, which is exactly what the southern states like Italy and Spain, as well as France, did not want. They wanted the debt mutualised across the whole Eurozone by using so-called Eurobonds, so that all Eurozone states would be on the hook. But the Eurozone member states that call themselves frugal, like Germany and the Netherlands, heartily disagree and will never, they say, ever allow the use of such financial instruments. So Italy's stuffed then. No, not quite. It turns out that Italian politicians have a little trick up their sleeve that might just put a Roman cat amongst the Brussels pigeons. Not only can they hang the threat of an Italexit over the block, they can also just continue to borrow money on the markets by selling Italian bonds. And that will present the European Central Bank and Brussels with a ginormous headache. And the Italians won't worry about giving Eurocrats a headache, as their economy is predicted by the IMF to take a 9.1% hit this year, and they feel abandoned by Brussels and some of the other EU27 member states, even after Ursula von der Leyen's grovelling apology to them a few days ago, which left many Italians with the feeling that they're unloved and that their best option would now be to leave the European Union and go it alone. And they've never forgotten the austerity imposed on them between 2010 and 2014 either. A decision by Italy to leave the EU would, according to experts, destroy the Eurozone and EU almost overnight. Remember that, according to the EU Commission, in 2018, Germany accounted for 28% of the value of sold industrial production across the whole EU, and Italy was second in line with 16%. And now that the UK has removed its fourth place 9%, Italy's importance will be enhanced. So Italy leaving the European Union would be a big event, and more damaging than Brexit because Italy is also in the Eurozone. But Italy does not have to leave the EU to cause havoc and bring those frugal northern states into line. As I've said, it could just keep pouring Italian bonds onto the debt markets instead of borrowing directly from the European Union. That way, firstly, they won't be tied to the EU. Secondly, they can spend the money they raise on what they want to and not just medical equipment. And thirdly, they will always have a buyer for those Italian bonds, the European Central Bank. Because if Italy just continues to sell bonds, then its national debt, which has already been touted to top 145% in debt to GDP terms this year, will keep rising. And this will hit the country's credit rating, which is already sinking to the floor of investment grade rankings and may go below that into the junk investment grades. This will make debt much more expensive for Italy and harder to service. And in doing so, Italy would probably break all the Eurozone financial rules, if they haven't done so already. And add to that reports that Italian banks are in a very bad way, with many of the assets now on their books said to be virtually worthless. A good recipe for causing absolute mayhem on the world's financial markets, to say nothing of the Eurozone. The ECB would therefore, in all probability, be forced to step in and buy those Italian bonds just to keep a lid on it all. And what would happen if Italy defaulted on them anyway? And how would the ECB fund it, other than printing money maybe? And this, together with the current Eurozone contraction, could cause the Eurozone to either shatter, or it might force all the 19 Eurozone states to pool their resources in full, or indeed even the wider EU 27, which was always the federalist plan anyway. Now, if you remember, the Eurozone found it hard enough to rescue Greece from its financial crisis from 2009 to 2018, and in economic terms, Greece is far smaller than Italy. But now we have the EU's third largest economy on the brink, and a Eurozone in turmoil. Yes, other countries are suffering, but they're not also trying to prop up a disparate collection of member states in a dysfunctional so-called union. Now, the latest numbers from the Market CIPS Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, out today make for horrific reading. The flash Eurozone Composite PMI stands today at 13.5, a record low, where anything above 50 represents growth and anything lower shows contraction. And the Germany flash PMI is 17.1, while France is at just 11.2. Just for completeness, the UK stands at 12.9 and Japan at 27.8. But at least the UK and Japan have their own treasuries and central banks. The Eurozone might have a central bank, but it has nothing approaching a treasury to control it all. So Italy could be a big thorn in the side for Brussels if it decides to force its hand into buying untold amounts of Italian bonds. And in an article by Ambrose Evans Pritchard in The Telegraph, he quotes Lorenzo Codogno, ex-chief economist at the Italian Treasury, saying that the ECB has no choice because Italy's debt is already unsustainable. And as far as he's concerned, you either use Eurobonds or let the ECB keep buying Italian debt, unless you want an Italian default that would upend everything. And one of the top economic spokespeople for Italy's Northern League party, Claudio Borghi, said that Brussels faces a choice: print money or watch the euro crash and burn. Everybody knows that there is no way to escape this mess without unlimited monetary financing by the ECB. None of the other gimmicks are going to work, he said. And he went on to say that if the Nordic bloc, as he puts it, didn't like it, they could leave the euro and the Germans could have their beloved Deutschmark back, and the Eurozone could then be consigned to the dustbin of history. And on that he said, "Either way, I am extremely relaxed." So it looks to me like the Italians have nothing to lose, and that makes them dangerous to the rest of the Eurozone and the EU. Either the whole thing breaks up and everyone goes back to controlling their own money, or everyone in the Eurozone and maybe the wider EU helps pay to get Italy out of the mire. And although not directly applicable here, it did remind me of an old financial adage. If you owe the bank £100, then you have a problem. But if you owe the bank £5 million, then the bank has a problem. And taking that further, if you owe billions or even trillions, then everyone has a problem. So I do disagree with Claudio Borghi on one point. There would be no dismantling of the euro and the Eurozone, not without massive market turmoil at the best of times, and right now it would be catastrophic. But he knows that, and is maybe banking on it, to get the full bailout of other people's money that Italy would need to stay solvent and in the Eurozone. It all comes down to whether the other member states believe that Italy really would do the Eurozone in, if it didn't get its own way. Or would it really cut and run, rather than taking a bailout loan that has to be repaid? For blackmail to work, it has to be credible. But can Brussels take the chance? Because one wrong step and it's off the tightrope they all go. And I reckon that Italian sentiment at the moment is such that most would be quite content to take the whole EU down if they themselves were forced under. What the Italians would have to decide is, what would be the best outcome? To leave the EU fully and go their own way, or mutualise their debt across the whole Eurozone and stay? And Brussels would have to decide, do they want Italy to leave, or do they want to take on its debt? I can't see much else in all of this. Now, the good news for Italy, though, is that according to the Italian news agency ANSA, the country is planning to restart much of its production and industry on the 4th of May. That could then be followed by retail outlets opening as early as the 11th of May. But not as welcome for many Italians has been the news that this crisis could result in the release from prison of dozens of mafia bosses. According to The Guardian, the Department of Penitentiary Police issued an internal memo that asks for names of prisoners who might be at risk during this health crisis because of age and certain illnesses. And with 3 elderly gangsters already having been released over this, there are fears more may follow. And already there are reports of prisoners hugging each other to catch the disease and receive a get-out-of-jail-free card. But maybe they won't get out of jail in quite the way they want to. Anyway, if you want to hear more from me, please don't forget to subscribe and also press that little bell, or you won't get any notifications. And if you want to see more of me, buy a mug with my mug on it. So what do you think about this? Will Italy leave the EU in the end? Please share and comment, and thank you for watching.